So surrender is often associated with your ability to relax or let go. And there's an implication that letting go requires effort and or a learning on how to let go. And if I asked you, well, just let go of that emotion. I mean, how frustrating is that? Man, I'm really upset. Just surrender, don't you know? And so that's kind of phase one. Phase one is I think it's something I do. Phase two is I think it's something I need to learn. It's not a doing, but it's something I need to learn. And the truth about surrender isn't about learning anything new. And it's not about doing anything. It's about listening. And I'll give you an example. What creates tension, which is typically the experience that you want to surrender to or surrender yourself from or liberate yourself from. None of us say, man, I really need to surrender when we're feeling absolutely relaxed and open to life. So if there's some previously held tension or contraction, which is in place from our conditioning, then typically that arises the invitation or the intuition that, there's something that I'm believing, whether it's conscious or not, that is creating a contraction that is now pointing me to what I want, which is intuition because it's what I am. To surrender and to open and to let go into pure awareness and to let the small self die is our most natural state. And this is why we all intuitively know the answer to so many things in our life is surrender, because the answer is ourself. So the moment that we have a thought, I'll give the example, the thought might be, I'm really angry at this person because of what they just said. You know, let's say they said something about, maybe it was something like, oh, Brandon, you're looking nice and slim. And let's say back when I was a bodybuilder, I would interpret that as small and weak and puny, you know. So let's say that version of me interpreted that in a negative way, and I'm in a contraction. Now, if that person then turns to me, and I'll just use the relationship because it's a good example. That doesn't require a relationship, but I use it because it's a good example. And the person looks at me and goes, you know, I'm sorry that I said that. I didn't know that that would offend you. Now, right in that moment, I can either listen to my conditioning that says, yes, you should be sorry. That did offend me. Your words offended me. Which is what the ego wants you to believe. It wants you to believe that someone else has the ability to offend you, which is impossible. It's insane to think that someone else's words hurt me. Because what happened in that moment is they said words, I believed my thinking, I told a story about their words, and I was hurt by my own story. So the opportunity to surrender is when our old story and our deep intuition and knowing are juxtaposed or are paradoxically coexisting. And you have a moment to either listen to the deep intuition, which then creates relaxation, creates opening. You experience the idea of letting go of the old conditioning. Or you can listen to the old conditioning. One is a very familiar, stressful voice. One is a very still voice. Now, it doesn't happen all the time. It can by just listening to the intuition and saying, actually, that's more true. And in this case, the intuition would be, you never hurt me in the first place. I hurt me. I believed my thinking. I believed my conditioning. It has nothing to do with you. So I forgive me. And now, of course, that would lead you to an inquiry because some of you might still believe that old conditioning. No, it is true. I am small and puny. That's why we do inquiry. You might look at that and say, is it true? You know, my body defines me. I mean, if that's true, then our body, who we are, is always changing. But isn't there a part of us that has never changed? The part of ourself we call I. So if my body really truly does define me, then I'm a different me at 5 and 10 and moment by moment by moment by moment. I might be a different physical person because my physiology and thoughts and senses are changing. But there's something a lot more fundamental to me, and that is that part of me I call I. And that is awareness. And awareness can't be puny, small, weak. So my conditioning is always a misinterpretation of myself. And an invitation to surrender is when I clearly see through that misinterpretation to the degree that I can hear or listen to the still voice within me of truth. The still voice that knows no one and what they say or do can hurt or harm the core essential me. And so I can either surrender by simply listening to that voice underneath, that voice that we all have. In Christianity, they call it the Holy Spirit. I can listen to that voice and get really still instead of reactive. Man, I'm mad at this person. Turn it around. I'm mad at me. I'm mad at my thinking about this person. I'm not mad at this person. And now we start to open. And that would be the example of going into our conditioning and turning it around and questioning it. Is it true? And then as a result, there's a natural surrender once we see it's not true. That's one way. Another way is to just see the truth. And sometimes, you're there when you're there. You don't need to pretend yourself to be there if you're not. But there are moments where we can notice stress, reaction, and conditioning and just get still and simply ask ourselves, what is the truth of this scenario? What is the deepest truth? And access it. That happened to me the other day. Let me think of the example. I'm not going to share the example because I haven't got permission to share it, but let's just say the person I was talking to had a belief about something that was being held strongly. And I tuned in and said, what's the deepest truth about this experience, about this idea? And I shared something that totally contradicted the belief, but for both of us felt deeply true. And the yes to that feeling of truth, which is sensational, which we feel in the body, feels relaxing, feels opening, feels expansive. Typically we take a deep breath. We might have chills. The allowing of the truth to permeate us and kill, literally dissolve, all that's not true, all that is conditioned, all that is hallucinated into reality is the surrender. And it can feel like a mini death. And it's not a doing. It's a clear seeing of the truth in the moment that is always available to emerge. The question is, are you open to it? Are you ready to die? To feel like your ideas, your beliefs, your plans, your attachments can be completely wiped out in a moment for the love of freedom? Are you willing to allow the truth to dissolve everything between you and total openness and total surrender and total liberation? So you think that the identity that dissolves is yourself. So we hold on to it. No, I am the one that has this vision and idea and business and partnership, and that's going to define me. That's going to give me peace and happiness, but it's actually the surrender of it that reveals your innate peace and happiness. It doesn't give you an emotion. It releases previously held contractions that are translating love, peace, and happiness as anxiety, worry, and doubt. So you're releasing that lens and then going, what I was looking for is right here in myself. That's what surrender is. It's an opening to self, or rather a revealing of the openness of the self, that can never really close. Because awareness has been unbroken your entire experience, even when you're contracted, even when you're holding on to the conditioning. Awareness has been completely opening, saying yes, yes, yes. And so we're just zooming out into ourself. And that feels like in the body a relaxation, a surrendering, and an opening. Don't practice opening. Identify what's keeping you closed and question it. And then deeply listen to the truth that might sound scary, but also creates total and complete liberation. That is your spiritual practice. That is your sadhana. That is what we can all be devoted to. That is the movement of God. It's all a movement of God, but that is the movement of God experienced as a body-mind. The truth moving in the form of thoughts that don't feel like yours, that are informed by awareness, that create openness, relaxation, love, connection. I am a movement and a rest. The rest is awareness. The movement is the expression. And when we are a yes to the natural movement, we live naturally. And when we live naturally, abundance, synchronicity, perfect timing, things self-organizing, relationships, beauty, celebration, good health is first nature, not second nature. So we are in a process of surrender, with, I should say, effortless surrender. So the moment we go to get and gain and become someone, we know we're actually being called to surrender. And now we know what that means. It's not a doing, it's not a learning. If anything, it can be an unlearning of conditioning and a listening to the truth in every moment that moves through us when we aren't mentally in a past or future. When we're here, now, there's a direction. You know, the direction for me is to take a sip of juice in this moment and to speak. And at the same time, the thoughts are happening simultaneously as the actions. And we can actually live moment by moment that way. And I'll be transparent, I don't always live that way. But what I do is when I'm not living in that flow of life, in that current that is unique to me, that we all have, I'm in inquiry. There's very little time compared to who I used to be that I spend between a life in flow, a life in surrender, and resistance. Over time, we're reducing the time in between the crucifixion and the resurrection through really learning inquiry and practicing inquiry. And sometimes when you start to live inquiry, you can see a situation and without any effort, the situation is completely turned around and the truth of it is revealed. And your reaction to it was a short contraction and a surrender. A short contraction and a thoughtless, wordless surrender. Because the principles that nothing has ever hurt me except for my own thinking. And then even deeper, the me that was hurt is my ego. And that's an invention. That's a hallucination. So the true me has never and can never been hurt. That's awareness. That's the screen to the movie. The movie cannot hurt the screen. So as these get more and more ingrained, they undo our conditioning, because instead of judging the conditioning, resisting the conditioning, fighting against it, which is the only thing that keeps it alive, we feel it. We sit right there in the fire of it. And we get to the truth. And that part of our persona that may have dictated our direction and depth in life dies, dissolves, and more love is revealed. So we're emptying and being filled, and emptying and being filled. It's only when we hold on and fight against do we create suffering.